stories are simple. Basically, you are one way, something happens, and now you're different. Tell that story.
That's Talmage Thane. He's the podcast director at FilmLab and the host of Released the Podcast. He had this to say about storytelling.
With the increased fear, the benefit is an increased amount of power and relatability. I had a DM from a guy after he listened to my first episode, and I share my whole story, and he said, "You literally explained my story word for word. I have never felt so seen."
But what he said next caught me off guard.
I think you lose some of yourself when you don't share your story. It doesn't have to be to the world, and it could just be to your journal.
Why do you think people struggle to share their stories?
Their thought is that people won't understand.
Welcome back to the To Create is Human podcast. I'm just going to give you a quick story bite, which is a new segment that I just introduced last episode. In 60 seconds or less, it's just a quick idea about storytelling, something that you can apply right away. Today's story bite is that stories need shape. If you've ever heard of Kurt Vonnegut, he's a famous storyteller. He has this graph that he draws where at the top of it is goodwill and fortune, and at the bottom of it is sickness and unfortune, whatever, the opposite of good fortune. And then, beginning to end of the story. And the gist of his whole graph and teachings is that when your story becomes a run-on sentence, it's just a straight line. There's no shape to it. It's just this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Stories need shape. They need characters, obstacles, resolutions. Don't make your story a flat line. Don't make it a run-on sentence. Give it some shape. And that is today's story bite. Now here's the full episode.
So for people who don't know you in my audience, for people that don't know you, just tell me a little about what you do. I'm obviously who you are, and I guess the angle you might have on storytelling.
Yeah. So I'm Talmage Thane. I started podcast production back in 2019, and I was just doing audio podcasts back then. It really caught my attention because when I was a kid, I had a speech impediment. I was also never a great learner in school. I was terrible at English and writing, grammar, all of that stuff. And so when I heard people speak very well, it just inspired me. And when they could tell a story very well, it inspired me all the more because it was hard for me to not talk about details that weren't important. It was hard for me to synthesize the core of the story. And so I just looked up to people that had this strength where I had a massive weakness. And so I'd listen to inspirational speakers like Les Brown, or E.T., or guys like that. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And then I got back from my mission, and I had always had kind of the dream to be a public speaker. But I had no idea how I could start, how I could practice. And honestly, joining a club like Toastmasters scared me. Toastmasters is a public speaking club.
Okay.
And that scared me to death. And then I heard about podcasts, and I was like, okay, this is sick. Okay, podcasts, you don't have to be in front of a lot of people, but you can put out your thoughts through your words, not written, but you're speaking them, which is nice for me because I wasn't a great writer. And so I started listening to podcasts. My dad, he's a marriage and family therapist. And I was like, you should start a podcast. And he's like, I don't want to have to learn how to do that. And I was like, I will learn. I will do everything. All you need to do is talk. Just because there's a lot of people in your field, a lot of families that need to know the expertise that you have. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll try it. So I started studying, in my university was YouTube. I just learned everything I could on YouTube, how to download Adobe Audition, hook it up to a audio interface, get the right mics, get a cloud lifter for the mics, all of that stuff. I was diving into the technical aspect, and it was great. it was so fun to start on my dad's podcast, and he didn't really care about quality, so he was a good guinea pig. And then often hear him not wrap things up well or not open the podcast well, and I started thinking about like, man, he doesn't have a lot of time to like script out how this should go. Maybe I should just jump on, do a quick intro, maybe an outro, talk about what next episode's about. And so I started doing that. And then I heard my own voice on the podcast because I was doing that for him. And I just fell in love. I was like, yeah, I want to be heard. I want to be able to speak. This is so cool. And so I started my own podcast, and it was a podcast for LDS returned missionaries. And that was a very heavily story driven podcast. It wasn't like advice for parents or anything like that. It was like mainly just explaining people's stories coming back from missions. And my mom, she was like, what you should do for your first episode is tell your story. And I'm like, I have no idea where to start. This is kind of scary because my podcast, it's a very vulnerable podcast. You kind of talk about very personal things. And I ended up writing a script for my first episode. I don't think it was that good at all. It was terrible, actually. But I put it out there anyway, and it had a lot of positive feedback, and that just sparked my excitement even more. I was like, this is awesome. How can I help other people tell their stories? So I started bringing other people on to tell their stories, and then started giving them some advice on how to craft it. A lot of people were like, hey, I want to be on your podcast. I'm like, okay, what do you want to talk about? What's your story? And they're like, I don't know. Like, it'd just be kind of cool. And I'm like, well, it has to be good. Like that.
I had people reach out to me too.
Not to be mean, but like, I need you to have something thought out so that way people can follow along. And so I started having people write a 500-word story about how they came off their mission and a struggle that they came across. And then they started asking me, well, what am I supposed to write about? What about this? What about that? And I was like, I just need to put together a very simple explanation for how they can craft their story. And I was talking to my mom about it, and she said, stories are simple. Basically, you are one way, something happens, and now you're different. Tell that story. And so so I started telling people, as you write your story, tell me how you were when you first got home from your mission. What challenge happened that made you have to change, have to adapt because of that challenge? And what was that change? And that became just like a very simple way to teach people how to tell their story. And it really helped them prepare to come on the podcast. And then since then, I've learned some more stuff. But that's kind of like how I got my start in storytelling.
That's awesome. So you said your mom was the one that gave you that definition? Because I
Yeah.
remember when we were on the phone, I was asking you just some questions. I was getting more into like actually wanting to build out, just a little bit of my clientele with podcast production. And I was asking you like a little bit about this. And I don't remember the question I asked. It must have been something surrounding story, like how to bring out the best story in your guests or something. But you told me that exact thing. And I'm not even kidding you. That's what I tell people now.
Yeah.
And I try to reference you as much as I can when I say it. But I'm like, dude, you were one way, something happened in the middle, change. Now you're another way.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a simplified version of that is like your change is your story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was actually in preparation for this episode here, listening to some of your episodes on some of your show on Release the Podcast.
Cool.
I really loved 2 episodes in particular. Danny's episode, and then Wes,
Yeah.
I forget his last name, but Wes's episode.
Wes, right.
Yeah, I really just loved the vulnerability of all of you, of all 3 of you guys, and the willingness for them to share some of the stuff that, I have not had the most perfect like progression with church and God either, and just listening to their stories and yours as well, as you kind of shared some of yours with them as well on those shows or those episodes. It just made me feel, and this is kind of what I want to touch on a little bit, but me as the consumer of those who I don't even know either of them super well, made me feel so much more close to them, made me like relate to them so hard. And I think that's the magic that I want to dive into a little bit here of stories, is that sharing yours or sharing a story has the power to just make people feel understood that you might not even know exist, that are listening to your, I don't know, might be a podcast, or maybe it's a book or a movie or something. But my question for you within that is, why do you think people struggle to share their stories?
Their thought is that people won't understand. And that could be true. If you hold back the truth, then people don't understand. But people, I think, have just an innate ability to understand when somebody is being genuine about their situation. And but it is scary, the fact that there's some people might judge you, some people might think you're weird. Like in my story, just to give a little bit of context, I talk about how I struggled with addiction with pornography, and that was super hard for me to share online, because that's a genie you cannot put back in the bottle. Once you say it, it's out there. People know. And I said it, I talked about it before I found my wife. And that was so scary, still being in the dating scene and kind of exposing myself to my potential pool of dates. And so I totally understand why people get really nervous about it, because people have had experiences where somebody will turn them down for a date because of their past. I've been told that on this one date I was on, I opened up to her. I talked to her about everything. We were close to dating at this point, and I was like, "Hey, I've struggled with this in the past." And she said, "The only thing I know about pornography is that Ted Bundy looked at it." And I'm like, "Oh, flip. You don't have to worry. Like, Ted Bundy is an anomaly. He's crazy. You're safe. You're good. Don't worry." And that like hurt me bad. And like we never went on another date. But I was like, ouch. And then I started thinking about this podcast, and I was like, what if I put myself out there again and I get rejected? But instead of just by one girl, it's by my whole community and the world. And so it's incredibly scary. So I don't want to diminish it for people that are scared to share their story. But with the increased fear, the benefit is an increased amount of power and relatability. People will, I had a DM from a guy after he listened to my first episode, and I like share my whole story, and he said, "You literally explained my story word for word. I have never felt so seen." And I like screenshotted it, and it just like, it made it all worth it, because I know that it affected him in a very positive way, and it's affected a lot of other people in a very positive way, and myself. Because I'm like, oh wait, like these people know a really hard part of my story, a very shameful part of my story, and they still like me. Maybe some of the fear is warranted, but maybe I was overdoing it a little bit with my fears, and I don't need to give it as much merit as I have in the past. And so, yeah, I would say, just to answer your question, like it is hard, but the more niche and genuine your story is, the more power it has to connect with people. If it's genuine, if it's super general, nobody will connect. If you're trying to make your story for everybody, it's for nobody at that point.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, I guess the cost. I've had this conversation with several people, but almost like, what would be the cost of not sharing that?
The cost of not sharing your story. Oh, dang, that's a great question. I would say I think there's a few things that you lose. Number one, you can lose that connection with other people. If you never let people in, they never know you, and your inner dialogue being like, oh, what if they don't like me? Well, they probably don't, because they don't know you. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the other thing is more personal. I think you lose some of yourself when you don't share your story. It doesn't have to be like to the world, and it could just be to your journal, but taking the time to define your story, to write it down, put a meaning to it as well. That has been one of the greatest things in my life, is crafting my story, putting a meaning to it, because then nobody else can. And it's not just this like very general, vague past. It's like, no, this is what happened in my story, and this is how I've been the hero of the story.
Love that. So then how have you taken what you've learned from sharing your story to then help your clients, the hosts of their shows that you guys produce? How has that helped you tell theirs?
Yeah, I've been able to do a lot of like consultation with different shows. Some of them are very narrative heavy, which I love those ones. Some of them are a little bit more just kind of like business marketing stuff, but you can still tell stories inside of that. And so one of the books I have recommended to a lot of my clients is Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. He is awesome. He's a award-winning storyteller, and he's won the Moth storytelling contest, like Grand Slam, like, I don't know, like 10 years running. And he's just amazing. And so what he's done in this book is he breaks down how to tell a story, how to find stories in your life, how to tell them. And I think he even has a course on how to tell them for business owners, like how to tell your stories business, so that people can relate to your business and be like, oh, I want to be part of that. So I haven't looked into that yet, but I would love to. And then I also tell them kind of like the same framework I've told you, like, you were one way, something happened, now you're different. Fill in the blanks. And so that's been really cool. Another handy tip that I've found just in my personal life to find stories in your life, because your life is full of stories, you just don't realize it, is in that book, he has something called Homework for Life. And that is where you write down every single day the one part of your day that could possibly be a good story. And maybe it's not, but you write down the most interesting thing that happened that day that you could potentially write into a story. And someday when you look back at your journal, you could be like, that actually was a great story. I'm going to kind of go through it and flesh it out a little bit more. And so those are a couple things of advice that I've given my clients that have really improved their storytelling.
I think the most beneficial tip that I've heard within storytelling, and this maybe it can apply differently to every kind of story, because I think stories can be a little subjective depending on what medium you're telling them through. But I think once you show that, like, that initial, this character was one way, something changed, now they're different, don't backtrack on that. I heard once in a YouTube video, like, don't break your hero's spine. They need to have a spine. You know what I mean? And when you're telling your own story, I mean, obviously it's very relatable to like face the same challenges throughout your life, like to fall back into the same habits or whatever it might be. But I guess an example relating to a kid's movie. Have you ever seen Hotel Transylvania?
Oh yeah.
So I just think it's so funny because Dracula throughout all three movies has the exact same problem. And I feel like it's not, I feel like they kill that character.
Yeah.
He has the same problem of lying to his daughter in all three movies. After the first one, you're like, great, he's learned his lesson. Like, I love this guy. And then the second movie, you're like, oh, he falls back into that habit of not telling Mavis what's really going on. Yeah, you're like, gosh dang it. Okay, well, maybe he'll learn his lesson this time. And by the third time that it's happened in the third movie, you're like, I love those movies, but I just feel like that is one part they really could have just,
Yeah.
you know, some character development of not falling back into the exact, like, are you kidding me, Dracula? You haven't learned by now? Like,
Yeah.
Mavis has a boy now. Like, you have a grandkid now.
Yeah. Dude, another TV show that does that exact same thing, same character development and then character digression is The Flash. Have you ever seen?
Yes.
Dude, I loved the first season, and then it started getting repetitive, and then I noticed the pattern. He would lie to his girlfriend about something because he had to do it to like save the world or something. He couldn't tell her the
Like,
truth.
we get it already.
Yeah. And then she would find out at the end. She'd get really mad. He's like, I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. And then he does it again in the next episode. Every single time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it bothered me so much. And another example is Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. They just killed his character because, like, in episode 5, he finds out that Darth Vader is his father. He goes down like this terrible, I don't know, traumatizing hole of like depression, being like, wow, this unredeemable character, most evil character in the world is my father. Do I have that inside of me? Maybe. But then in episode 6, he's like, no, I'm going to hold on to hope instead. And I'm going to redeem my father. And he does, which is amazing. And then in number 8, he throws away everything he ever believed in. And I'm like, why would you do that to your character? Why? Oh man, it just like irked me so bad that they would kill him like that.
I totally feel that. Yeah. I had heard that and it stuck with me really hard. Like,
That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah. Don't break your character's spine. And I related it back to Hotel Transylvania. And those are some other great examples as well. I guess to segue into something else related to storytelling, just a question I have for you. With podcasts, they're a different medium than other forms of videography or video production. And so normally, like, I would ask somebody like, okay, how do you decide what to keep in the story, right? But I feel like with podcast production, generally podcasts are more conversational. And so sometimes
So you keep
there's
a lot of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We keep, for me, depending on the show, between 60 to 90% of it stays.
Yeah.
Sometimes 100%.
Yeah.
I follow a lot of podcasts that I know they turn on the button, they turn off the button, and the whole thing gets uploaded, and that's fine.
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Right there. Even when they have technical difficulties for like 6 minutes and nothing's being said, they still upload it like
Dude,
that.
I know it drives me
like,
crazy.
what in the world?
But vulnerability, I mean, you could justify it. But
Yeah.
my question for you, I guess, is instead of what do you keep in, I guess, what do you deliberately leave out of a podcast to kind of help the story?
Ooh, that's good. When it's a podcast that does require me to like do some more fine-tune editing, take stuff out, craft it a little bit, I try to take out the interesting things that don't have anything to do with the story or that will distract from the story. Yes, it's interesting, but it's going to be a red herring for your audience. They're going to start thinking, oh, the story's going down this path when actually it goes down this path and they don't even recognize it. And so, for example, there's in the book Storyworthy, he's talking about how his car died at one point and he's trying to make money to, I don't know, get gas so he can drive home or fix his car or something. And so he has the idea to pretend to be part of a charity and he goes house to house asking for money. And it's an awesome story. But what he left out was that he met this crazy like mountain man mechanic that had like the funniest things to say and just like a lot of interesting things, but it would have totally taken away from him being a fraud, putting on a McDonald's charity outfit and going door to door asking for money and stealing money from these poor people. And so he left out the interesting things that distracted from the story. And I've found myself taking that stuff out. Not just the uninteresting things, but the interesting things.
That is a very good point. Yeah. I hadn't really positioned it in my mind that way though. I love the point you make of like, it's interesting, but it just doesn't serve the story. So
That's a good way to put it. Serving the story.
yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Like, one of my favorite things inside of like podcast editing is making the trailer for the podcast episode.
Yeah.
Have you found that? I think it's really fun.
It is one of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever played Ransom Notes? It's like a board game where you have like a ton of different words, like random words, and then you're given a prompt and you have to make a note out of all of your random words. So the prompt could be like, describe how to make a pizza. And then you're like, oh, flip. I have a wheel. Wheel is here. And then this word and this word. And you're trying to combine them all together. And you can't write your own thing. You have to work with what you've got. And I kind of feel like that's the same way with like podcast trailers. You have to work with what you got. So you have to be very selective, grabbing only the most essential things and like the most interesting things. I just got done with one trailer that I'm really proud of. I think it'll do well. But she's talking about how she like lost her voice and she feels like God took away her voice, and like her journey to regaining it and singing again and having faith and all this stuff, and putting it together, leaving out all of the uninteresting things that won't serve the trailer's story was, I don't know, it's just super fun. It's a different type of storytelling from host to being the editor of a podcast.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Have you ever listened to or watched any of Diary of a CEO stuff
good.
with Stephen Bartlett?
Dude.
Those intros are so good.
His are so good.
His have taught me, because I really more as just as an editor than a consumer, but I pay attention a lot to how the order of it within the trailer. Sometimes and he'll always leave on a cliffhanger too.
Yeah.
He'll leave on like, oh, so if you had to tell me the most 3 important things to fix this part of my life, what would you tell me? They're like, number 1, this, number 2, this, but the most important one, riser cut off.
It's so good.
It goes into the episode. That I really enjoy listening to that. And then I guess to contrast, very similar style of podcast, but very contrast, or a very stark contrast in style, in the way they start, is Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson.
His is great too.
Just
instantly
cut straight. I'm like, there is
jingle, no nothing.
Right. I'm like, I appreciate that actually.
Yeah, me
really
too.
appreciate just jumping into the meat of it. I was actually, as part of my research for kind of this season of the show, I was listening to a lot of, I forget his name, but he was the producer. I want to say he was a producer and a co-writer for a lot of the huge Disney shows between 95 and 05. So like Finding Nemo, Toy Story, Monsters Inc., like some of those huge ones. And he said the biggest mistake that a lot of people make with telling stories is they don't make me care. He's like, he says, we all know what it's like to be in a hotel room and we turn on the TV and we're flipping through channels and nothing catches our eye.
Yeah.
And like, well, and you can have the most like interesting visuals, or like you can have the most outrageous like game show going on, but until something makes you care, like you're not going to stop. And so he says, gosh dang it, just make me care. Get me to stop. You know what I mean? Is that, and that goes right in hand with kind of what you're saying with the trailers. Like, I feel like that's our job with, because sometimes with podcasts, depending on the show, and every show is different, a lot of them open up with, and it's not wrong, a lot of them open up with, hey, tell me who you are and what you do and a little bit about yourself. And that may not always be the most scroll stopping, not even scroll stopping, because you intentionally click on a podcast to listen to it, but it may not be the most, keep you there kind of vibe. And so the trailers, I feel like a lot of the time, the task that we're given with the trailers is to say, why should I stick for 40 minutes, 2 hours, however long the podcast is?
It's such a awesome balance.
It is.
It's hard because you have to make them care by giving them enough details that they're like, oh wow, this is very interesting, but not satisfy them too much because you want them to watch the full episode.
Yeah,
And so
that's
like
the ticket. Yep.
yeah, don't satisfy them too much. And then you have to like play different balancing games like that with a lot of, I'm trying to think of the different elements of a podcast or a trailer. It's not just the interest in the details and the generality. It's also, I'm blanking. There's just a few more elements that you have to balance while you're making a trailer. And trailers are a really good exercise in what makes a good podcast and the overarching story of a podcast. And like you said, there's still like anecdotes inside of the podcast that are awesome that you could still make something out of and you could still keep in the podcast. But for the trailer, you have to be very specific.
Yeah, absolutely. Has there been a moment or where that has changed the way you tell stories, or has it kind of been more of like a gradual shift
Very
throughout?
gradual. I'm a slow learner. I'm such a slow learner. Because there'll be times where I'm more worried about what people think than
Dude, me
the
too.
actual story, and then I look like an idiot in the process because like I'm more worried about that, and it just like the edit turns out bad, or like I'm trying too hard with the edit, or like if I'm hosting a podcast, the story comes across as try hard, and it's just like it doesn't work as well as when you are just genuinely like telling a well-crafted, honest story. And so I think that's one thing that like I've had to learn over time. It's definitely taken me a lot of time, and I'm sure I'm still going to mess up at times with that. But it's the genuineness. Like nobody cares. Like talk about like making someone care. If they can tell you're not genuine, they're gone.
People have such a good BS reader. If you're not fully transparent, like people can pick it up pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What is it for you that makes a story stick long after it's over?
I do think I have to, I think this is for everybody, but you have to just feel what the character is feeling. Like if you want them to feel sad, you have to make them feel sad. If you want them to feel like ecstatic, you have to just make them feel that. Describe it in a way that I can't help but live in their shoes. And then really interesting elements definitely don't hurt. And so if there's a really interesting part of your story, like, I'm blanking right now, but like if you have any interesting part of your story, I went scuba diving and this crazy thing happened, or I was backpacking through the Amazon and this crazy thing happened, that helps. The story's not about that thing. The story is about your inner change, but those elements still help. For example, Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is about going to this guy who goes to an island full of dinosaurs and all this, and they have to survive. That's kind of what it's about. That's like an attention grabber. But what it's really about is this guy who doesn't want kids, but is in love with this woman. And he has to end up protecting these kids from these dinosaurs. And he learns that he can love kids. And then he realizes, hey, maybe I do want kids. And it's a beautiful story of his inner struggle, surrounded by some awesome stuff happening, like T-Rexes and velociraptors.
It hits every part of you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It entertains, but it also kind of satisfies a little bit of your soul to see that like somebody else was changed by something, the transformation of something.
I just learned this word, a juxtaposition. The juxtaposition, that's like when like two apparently like very different things meet.
Oh, okay.
And so like the juxtaposition of a guy who doesn't want kids mixed with dinosaurs meets, it paints a very vivid picture in your mind that is it can't be mistaken for anything else, basically. And so when people describe the story of Jurassic Park, you're going to say Jurassic Park. You're not going to say Land Before Time. It's like this juxtaposition of two very different things meeting. And I think that provides a lot of memorability, making it memorable.
Would you say I'm just trying to think it out here. Would you say that it's almost like the irony that those two things somehow met in a world where you would never imagine they would?
Yeah,
that makes it memorable?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to say it. It's like the irony. It's like, who would have thought? But this is the only story like that. So kind of cool.
Yeah, that is cool. That is cool. Have you ever been sitting through an episode, whether it's something that you like an episode on your show or a show that you're producing for, and you can feel that the story isn't, I don't know if it's, maybe it's taking a completely left turn, or maybe people, the host and guest or the two co-hosts or whatever it might be, aren't in their rhythm yet, and you've had to change something up mid show, mid episode. Have you ever been in a situation similar to that? And if so, what is it that you tried to change, even if it didn't work out, 100% okay?
Yeah. I do have some examples of that. Oh man. And some painful examples too, like where,
because I've been in those situations.
It's painful on both ends, like whether you're producing it or you're like a guest or a host on a show. I've been in podcasts where I've been producing it, and I don't feel like I have that kind of relationship where I can direct, but I desperately want to, because I'm like, let's just pause. Let's just talk about these different things. And then I didn't. And then the podcast was just kind of like a flop. And they're like, let's just not even put that episode out. I'm like, I could have saved that, but I didn't. But there's been a lot of times where I've been interviewing somebody and something's just off. Like we're not connecting somehow, or they're really hesitant to tell their story, or they are being tryhards and really trying to make themselves look awesome and
put on a mask for the camera a little bit. Yeah.
And during those times, I have to not be the bad guy. Kinda. I have to like tell myself it's okay to push them. They're gonna be fine. If they really don't like how I've pushed them, I can always edit it out. And so if something's awkward, that's okay. We can edit it out. But like, ask the hard question, for goodness sake. Ask the awkward question to get them to actually think, to get them to actually connect, or actually tell an honest feeling that they're having in the moment. Because if you're feeling awkward, your audience feels it 10 times more. And so
it's a great point. Yeah.
Shine a light on the elephant in the room and get them to be genuine. Sometimes people are begging you to force them to be genuine. And when you do, things get great. And it's like one of the most enriching conversations they've had in years, because people don't push them when they're not being fully genuine. And so I'd say ask the awkward question.
Have you ever seen Sunday Conversations with Caleb Presley?
Oh, that sounds familiar, but I don't think so.
So it's kind of a play on words with the word Sunday, but it's a very, very funny show. He has on primarily athletes on YouTube, and they're only like 5 to 10 minute YouTube videos. He has blonde, long hair.
Oh, wait.
It's like his whole personality.
Oh, yeah. Anyways, and he has another guy
sitting there eating sundae the whole time, eating ice cream.
He's awesome.
And
he's great.
I love what you said about addressing the elephant in the room. That is his entire show, is addressing the things that the media says about them that maybe they don't ever talk about on another show, because it might be the things that they're like, I don't know about. But he directly asks them about it in a way that doesn't make them really look like an idiot. Yeah. But he just he asks about it in a funny way and has them kind of come to light about it. And I think the guest that I've seen some guests on his show that have no clue what he's doing. Like I Show
Yeah.
Speed was on his show once.
Oh, really?
And he was taking everything so ultra seriously.
personally?
And
Oh,
he was
no.
screaming and cussing. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, it made it so funny because he
Yeah.
had no clue what was going on, but almost embarrassing for Speed. But
Yeah.
But anyways, it's funny because Caleb does a great job at saying, like, he had on Tom Brady, and he said, "Hey Tom, like, what would you do if, fourth quarter, 40 seconds to go, and you've got to drive the ball down. You're down by 4 points, and you got to drive the ball down and score." And Tom's like, he puts a scenario out there. Tom Brady says, "Oh, I would do this," and he said, "Okay, so in the Super Bowl against the Eagles," he's like, "You were given this exact situation and you didn't do this," and the media is beating you up over it. And Tom's like, he was speechless. Anyways, it was
that's
just
awesome.
it was so funny. But I think he did a perfect job of that exact same
Yeah.
thing you were saying, of address the elephant in the room of like, really, you're so perfect at that. Like,
Yeah. That is awesome. I need to watch some of his stuff.
they're so funny. They're so freaking funny. Do you have a favorite story? Is there a favorite story of
Favorite
yours? It could be in
story.
any medium.
Any medium.
Movie,
Dude,
book.
That's so hard. Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple
Yeah.
in different mediums.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wasn't super into reading books for a while just because I was busy, but then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna read Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Have you read that? Dude,
I've heard of it.
it's phenomenal. Which, by the way, Apple Podcasts just bought the rights to a lot of his books to turn them
cool.
into movies and TV shows. Which, not Apple Podcasts, sorry, Apple TV.
Apple TV. Oh, sick.
I'm stoked. I am
Sick.
stoked about that because Apple TV puts out some good stuff. But yeah, Way of Kings, phenomenal story. He makes you care so much. He makes you feel what these characters are feeling, and like the highs and the lows are insane. And so I don't want to spoil anything, but if you want a good book and you have 50 hours to spare, that's a great one to listen to. So that's a great one. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it's a good one. Movies, dude, that's a tough one.
There's so many anymore.
There's so many good ones. Yeah. Okay, I'll say one that is. It's just one I saw recently that I had super low expectations when like going in to watch it. K-pop Demon Hunter. Have you seen
Dude,
that?
My wife and I watched that on repeat.
Yeah.
We love that show.
It was so good. It was so good.
I
was like,
love the
very
message
impressed.
about tackling your demons. It feels so relatable.
So relatable. And I'm like, I'm the only one in the room they're talking to right now.
Right.
But like it's touching everybody the same way. But I was very impressed with how they did it. At first I was like, this is so childish. This is
The anime type,
Yeah.
like animation. Yeah.
but they killed it.
They did. Yeah.
So that was great. There's a lot of different podcasts I love. How to Take Over the World. He dives into different characters in history, and he will kind of dissect their life, the habits that they built, like their lifestyle that helped them take over the world, like Napoleon Bonaparte, Alexander the Great, Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, all these different kinds of people.
That's epic.
And so it's really cool. I like his stuff because he actually has some dramatized moments in his podcast where he'll like tell like a little anecdote from their life, and you'll hear like a wagon wheel turning over some rocks and stuff like that. So it's dramatized, which I think is a really fun way to do podcasts. But
I've
I
heard a
haven't
couple
really
shows
dove
like
into
that too.
Yeah, it's cool.
It is.
It's not everybody's style, but
right.
I
It's
like
a whole
it.
different kind of immersion. And I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. I was just saying
Oh, no,
I
you're
was
good.
recommended a show a while ago. Can't even remember the name of it because it was not my style to listen to, but I thought I was very intrigued by it. And everything, it was a murder mysteries documentary. Or sorry, documentary podcast. But it reminded me of like a documentary because I felt like I was just listening to all the sounds, and they had music and like eerie. They had drones going on in the background, like the eerie. Anyways,
So
it was very, very interesting in podcast format, but it was a podcast only, and it was audio only. So again, maybe
Like,
that serves the
movies
purpose.
or podcasts like that are the only ones that can be audio only.
Right.
Not the only one. Sorry, but you can't do a video podcast with a story like that.
Right. Yeah. Sorry. Some of your others, I was just chiming in
Oh
there.
yeah. No, I think that's such a cool median. And then I don't it's not everybody's like cup of tea, but I think it's fun. And so, yeah, it's tough to choose a story because there's so many good ones out there. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how good their story can be because they haven't crafted different parts of it. But once you start crafting it, you realize I have a good life. I have a cool life. And it doesn't have to be the most epic thing, hiking through a jungle with dinosaurs chasing me. It could just be the time I snuck the cookies out of the cookie jar and then realized that, I don't know, my grandma had made those for my sister's birthday and I felt bad. It could be like that. And you don't think that that'd be story worthy, but it is.
Dude, beautiful. I appreciate your time. Where can people find you if they wanted to know more or follow you for more?
Yeah. You can find me on all the social medias at Talmage Thane. Or if you want to listen to my podcast, it's at Released the Podcast. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. I don't have a ton of my episodes on YouTube actually, but I should put them up. Just time. But yeah, those places would be great.
Sick. Thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.